What's up, everybody? This is Grant, that Cause Artist. Today, I'm speaking with Joshua Haynes, the managing partner at Masawa Fund, on working in 35 countries, speaking 7 languages, and using natural medicine, technology, and workplace wellness to help billions of people live impactful lives in the global economy. Joshua's story is pretty incredible and powerful. He overcame depression, anxiety, and an eating disorder in a tough childhood, raised on welfare by a single mother. Throughout his 20 plus year career, he's been at the nexus of innovation, technology, and social impact. He served as a Peace Corps volunteer. He's been a data analyst, a software developer, consultant, and he also served as a diplomat in the Obama administration in the USAID program and managed $190 million in impact grant funding for the US and Sweden governments. He has a degree from Boston University in finance and an MBA from Tufts University. Masawa, as he says it, is the Mental Wellness Impact Fund, and they have a laser focus on financial viability, social impact maximization. So I really hope you enjoy the conversation. Thanks. Usually how I like to start these is with the individual's journey on how they sort of to get to their life's work, so to speak. A lot of people, when I talk to them, they're in that sort of phase of their life where they're working on, something that will maybe not define them, but it's going to be a big chunk of their life that they dedicate themselves to. So talk to us about the journey. I know it's been a long, tough road for you, but I mean, if you want to give us a little bit of the cliff notes, you could start wherever you want on how you start, how and why you started the fund.
Right, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Grant, for also having me and having us. This is exciting to be here. I think our journeys are never linear. It's always zigzagged back and forth, and where we are now is never where we ever expected to be. But that happens to a lot of us, right? Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate to be raised by a single alcoholic mother on welfare in New Mexico. And I say I was fortunate because I had to learn a lot of hard life lessons pretty early on: responsibility, caring for my family, adaptability. I went to 6 high schools in 3 years, but I was one of the lucky ones that was able to get out of that catch-22 of poverty, welfare, because I was good in school and I could make people laugh. And I won a scholarship to move to Germany for a year to live with a host family.
Wow.
And so on that year of living with a host family in Germany, where I saw what a real family could be. Now, when I say real family, of course, my family was a real family, but what a more traditional, at least that type of family could be, that really changed a lot of things in my mind. I learned I was really good at learning languages and assimilating into other cultures. I was really good at kind of understanding how pieces fit together. And then that kind of guided me for the next 15, 20 years. I had a number of really interesting careers. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco, working with artisans and cyber cafes. I was a software developer, worked on data analytics all around the world, helping really big companies get even richer. Yeah, that didn't fit so well. It didn't feel so well because I felt something needed to happen. It wasn't just like helping these people get richer. And then I spent a lot of time looking at the power of technology in developing countries, innovation, human rights, civil society, and was fortunate to be a diplomat in the Obama administration, where I managed a portfolio of about 190 million in innovative grant programming and really worked on shifting the power dynamic between those who had money, the government, those who give all this aid money out, and those who received money. But, starting when I was about 35, finally came to terms with the fact that I needed help. It wasn't just that I could have this funny guy, this smart, spoke all these languages. It was really about, I was broken inside. And so after my family and I moved to Berlin after leaving the US government, I crashed and burned. Now, I had many would think is a very good, at least adult life. I had a loving husband. We just celebrated yesterday our 18th year together. Wow. We had 2 wonderful kids. I worked in 35 countries. I spoke 7 languages, but I had never taken the time to really look inside what was wrong with me and why I couldn't meet that potential that I thought I had inside of me. So it took a number of years of looking at other approaches besides the Prozac and the Wellbutrin that I was on, or besides the psychotherapy that I was on. Now, that was helpful for me, certainly, to understand that there was a lot in my past that was causing me to be the way I was. But really started to look at the power of holistic approaches: mindfulness, exercise, nutrition, psychedelics, community-based activities, workplace wellness. Then realized the size of this issue of mental illness. The stats are alarming. And it's, something even after COVID-19, we can't really talk about too much, although maybe it's a little easier. The fact that depression is the #1 cause of disability worldwide, that it costs $1 trillion a year in lost productivity, because of mental illness. But there's all these innovations that are happening. I know some of the other people you've talked to, and there's a lot of really exciting stuff happening in terms of us being able to be okay with ourselves. And then started looking around about the financing. So who's paying for all this to happen?
Yep.
Sure, there's the VC model. That's important. That capital is an important catalyst. But for me, it was really important to also be able to drive increased social impact. And we found that there were no impact funds that were focusing as much on maximizing social impact as it was on maximizing profitability. And then in November of last year, took the plunge and started Masawa, the Mental Wellness Impact Fund.
It's quite obviously a journey from a bunch of different career landmarks and personal sort of landmarks. And I think the one thing we want to go back to real quick was under the Obama administration, was that under the U.S. aid program? Is that what that was for? And that was injecting charitable aid, or is that more entrepreneurial sort of allocation of capital into, rural areas around the world? Like, how was that money allocated? And was that really like a learning sort of exercise for you? And obviously did that help with sort of the process of creating the fund in some sort of way?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was, with the U.S. Agency for International Development, and actually in partnership with the Swedish counterpart. So I was fortunate to also be in Sweden as a Swedish employee. That was this, big American guy being there in Sweden, which was great. But that was providing, for the most part, grants to set up various different programs, whether it be around internet freedom, internet governance, or setting up innovation centers in places like Cambodia. That really were catalysts for social enterprises, for civil society to be able to hold the power about how they dealt with the aid, the funding that they were getting themselves.
After you, I guess, were done with that seemed to be, or a little bit after, a point where personally you kind of had this inward journey of facing some facts in your life, inner demons, if you will. I think we all sort of have them in different levels, for sure. Was there like a night or like a week? Like what exactly do you think was sort of the breaking point? And did you then stop taking your sort of traditional medication, or did you see that as being an issue? Or was it just everything was building up for 35 years?
Yeah. So I think, realizing that, I needed a Prozac too, just like my mom was always on.
Right.
Like that was when I was 35. Most of my life I weighed 135 kilos, 300 pounds, and, had a really bad eating problem. And so it got to a point when I first got on Prozac when I was 35 that I just couldn't handle it anymore. Like I could only think about food, like get food in my mouth. That's the only thing that's gonna hold me or respect me. Because I couldn't respect myself. And then when it came to Berlin, I had a really great job, but within 2 weeks I got fired because I could not function. My brain was foggy. I couldn't do anything. It had all come to a fore. It was the whole thing of moving our family from from Stockholm to Berlin. I had a 9-month-old son, a 4-year-old daughter, my husband here, and trying to get us settled, but also realizing that I was just broken. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't function, and I didn't know why. I was like paralyzed. And so I didn't stop taking my medication directly afterwards. It took a long time, a process of me also studying and understanding how to get off of the medication so I could do it safely, with the help of medical advice. But, for me, one of the turning points was maybe 7 months after that, after doing tons and tons of research, was nutrition. As soon as I stopped eating highly processed carbs and sugars, after just a couple of weeks, my world changed completely. There was like a veil that had been lifted. And that kind of was fire and fuel for saying, okay, how can I be better? How can I even do more? And really try to understand how I am and where I am and be okay with that and be vulnerable with the fact that I'm not good at a whole ton of things. I'm really, really fucking shitty. I mean,
you can. Yeah.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, cuss away.
Yeah, thank you.
I actually appreciate cussing. I think it gets points across really well.
I have to watch out sometimes with my kids, but then sometimes I don't give a shit. That there has to be like something else, that and being okay with that vulnerability. That I'm really bad at this, and this, and then I'm still working on trying to figure out where is that. And then now I have a number of people who really yes, are surrounded and help me, personal coaches. I have a somatic coach, kind of working on how do I understand all the voices in my head. So where are those different characters in the play that makes up Joshua Haynes' life, and why is that? So that's a lifelong quest.
So was that internal journey to get yourself right, almost the catalyst, all that research you were doing, was that the catalyst for actually like looking into starting a fund, right?
Absolutely.
Looking at all this, what was it food, the first sort of light bulb that went off? As sort of my friend is, he's working on he has a company as well, and it's sort of a fund holding company model, but his mantra is food is medicine, right?
Sure.
So looking at food as medicine rather than just this kind of thing we do without any consequences. Like food has a powerful, system that it could be delivered to us if we sort of, respect it in the way and deliver it into our bodies the way it can be, right, in a positive way. So would you say food was that real catalyst to really dive into other things?
Sure. I think food was really opened my mind to like, wait, it's not just something that I do 3, 4, 5 times a day because that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
Or, all of having been raised in the US on processed foods.
Right. Right.
It's just, that constant dopamine hit you get, and from the cheap, greasy, sugary food that you can just, plow down, and I'm still working on today, listening to my body, let my body tell me when I need food and not when my head tells me I need food. Yeah. And that's a hard thing because it's been 40 years now that I've been, ingrained, to do that. And so that, again, that'll be a lifelong journey. A lot of the research that I had done was definitely fundamental to kind of the need to have peer-reviewed evidence-based research when we're making our investment decisions. There's a number of things that are really exciting, and there's a lot of additional research that needs to go to prove various aspects. And so, we take a pretty keen look at that when we're looking at our investment opportunities.
So let's talk a little bit about the fund and sort of the philosophy and I guess the mission, and what it's going to be, right? And what are some of the sectors, and kind of reading over the story and the purpose of the fund. Obviously food is big, mental wellness and psychedelics, maybe these holistic medicines that can mean a ton of different things, right? There's just so much interesting data coming out now with all these different medicines from plants, or from food even. So what I guess are the top line things when you're talking with investors that you're sort of preaching to them, right? And what are some of the highlights that you're giving them?
Essentially, we're investing in founders that are devoted to improving mental wellness through ambitious products in areas like nutrition, natural medicine, mindfulness, technology, both hardware and software. There's a whole slew of not only platforms for digital therapy, but also AI, chatbots, machine learning that are really coming to the fore, as well as with sound and frequencies. And it's just really some powerful work up there. And then lastly, workplace wellness, because the place where most of us spend most of our time thinking about has a mental health in and of itself. And so there's a number of opportunities there around mental wellness. We estimate conservatively that there's about a $270 billion market in Europe and North America, and the categories that we're focused on. And so there's ample opportunity, and there's new, especially after COVID-19, there's a number of new innovations coming. And so how we look at that, though, there's a lens that we take. It's not just about ensuring that these companies are going to grow and become unicorns. We actually don't plan on investing in any unicorns, because we hold the founder's mental health and their ability to create a resilient organization as a cornerstone to our investment, right? Because if you're not doing okay yourself, how are you going to be able to create a team that's doing okay, that is on board with you and impacting and really improving the lives of millions, billions of people, which then directly relate to increased revenue and profit. And so that's why we also not just focus on the deploying capital through looking at this organizational health impact and business profitability markers, but also how do we nurture the capital after the deal is done? That 10-year process, that marriage that we're in with these founders and their teams, ensuring that they have not only the business resources to make sure the products are fit and sell and they can repay the investments, but also that they can maximize the impact and that they can have the most resilient organizations possible. Because that's where we see is really the kind of the sweet spot that a lot of other people aren't focusing on. Where are the founders' personal coaches, not their business coaches. They're going to have that, but how do they themselves be better humans in order to have a better shot at helping society. And then what is that organizational aspect looking like? A lot of startups fail because of that relationship between the founders. So we try to get in there and kind of unpack what does this mean, and are you aware of your own mental wellness and what that means as a result on your product.
When you talk to investors, and I'm sure they're coming from all around the world, and you kind of have a interesting perspective because you grew up in America, and then you kind of lived abroad. Sure. Would you say, a couple questions is like, how far has sort of the topic of mental illness come? As looking at it as an economic issue, right? Because I think that's sort of, we're seeing, like you said, how it affects the workplace, right? Then how it affects work, and that work affects how people do their job, and there's sort of this domino effect. Do you look at like globally that other countries take mental illness more seriously than the United States, or do you see now that that's sort of shifting, or maybe it's not like that at all?
Yeah, it's certainly shifting, and also you have to look at the subcultures inside all of these countries. So we're seeing investors definitely, I think, are waking up that there's a need now more, and that people are willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
I think in general, the U.S. is very far behind when it comes to mental illness. Look at the suicide rates. Look at the other like comorbidity issues around, the diabetes, the obesity, a number of other issues that really have contributing factors to mental wellness, which is huge in the U.S.
Or the shooting up of like schools, and like all
absolutely,
like it's just,
or the racial disparity, like the injustice that's happening, in which a lot of those things are generational issues, and that will also persist now because of COVID, because of the issues that are in our society, unfortunately. And so yes, there's a reckoning coming now. Other countries, I think, are doing better in terms of being able to talk about it and have it in the public sphere, but most countries are doing worse around the world, just because it is such a taboo, especially around men being able to be honest about their feelings, or open up and be with their bodies and not just with their heads,
right?
Or with marginalized populations, with the LGBT populations, or people of color. These issues are incredibly pervasive, and so that also means market opportunity and an opportunity to maximize impact, and so, which is what we're so excited about being able to do, given we have about 100 companies in our pipeline that we're looking at, but there are thousands of others that are being created around the world.
Could you don't have to go to details, right?
Sure.
But those 100 in the pipeline, can you give us just a little bit of a clue into like maybe what they do and what they're focusing on?
Absolutely. So some are looking at workplace resiliency platforms for blue collar workers, for truckers, and factory workers, and people who wouldn't ever be caught meditating.
Right.
There's anonymous chat platforms in Africa with licensed therapists, so that they can maintain their dignity and not have to, because they can't talk to their family about these things. Some are psychedelic in nature. We're looking at actually creating the molecules around psychedelics and trying to synthesize those.
Yep.
There are some others that are games for youth that really help with anxiety and really understanding what that is and playing through. There are others that are looking at using hip hop and rap and meditation together as the driving force for specific marginalized population. And that's just the very tip of the iceberg. All the nutrition aspects, the different types of sugars that are being created that have low glycemic indices. It's pretty exciting.
How do the business models sort of work when developed worlds are different, right? There's a ton of different products, or there's a lot more people who could pay for like mental wellness, right? It's sort of almost like this. It's almost like a luxury to be able to like purchase the ability to get mental wellness, right? At a good level, I guess. Like right now, like all the apps and things like that, like all the fitness stuff, like you still have to pay for it, right? But like if you're like in Kenya or Uganda and you're living in like the slums and stuff, like how do we get to those individuals, right? Where they're not going to have the ability to like pay for help, right? Like, do you work with governments? Like how do you, I guess, how do we make products for people, for people in those scenarios?
Yeah, I think the exciting thing is that, and Kenya specifically is a hub of innovation, that a lot of things have happened and had to happen because they've had to leapfrog what's happened in the U.S. And so they're far ahead with mobile money, with a number of different aspects. And so I think in terms of being able to provide access, there's employers who can provide for their employees. There's governments, and there's also micro product.
Mm-hmm.
So not necessarily, full on blown apps, but just like in the slums of Nairobi, you buy a very small amount of soap and not a whole bottle of soap, because you buy what you need to use. You can, there's also other models that you really are able to use. And so, yeah, there's a number of different ways of getting it. There's the entire insurance schemes. There's international organizations, the UN, the World Health Organization. And so there's a lot of people who also want to pay for these aspects and also want to invest, whether it be pension funds or sovereign wealth funds, because they see the power in reducing the cost that mental illness has. If you look at the cost of absenteeism because you can't get out of bed,
Right.
That's not just on the company; that's also on society and the GDP of a country. And so it's in everyone's interest to be able to work together around this, and there are a lot more people now coming together to figure out ways of doing that.
The one thing I want to touch on, it's really just an interesting topic that I had the pleasure of kind of being on, not the inside, but just having a friend that's really into it for the last 2 years, and him educating me on psychedelics and sort of the journey that's taken through trials and through the ability where decriminalization is happening here in certain cities in America. Yeah. And I guess what's your perspective on that? Like, if you've done a lot of research on it? I mean, there's tons of data coming out on it now that's overwhelmingly positive. Sure. It seems like, and the idea that hopefully one day an individual can walk into something like a massage parlor, right, or something, that scenario, right, and take a guided sort of journey, right, mental health journey is inspiring to me. Like, that's amazing. Like, to me, that is a game changer on a lot of different levels. Do you see that, like, globally, the more of the acceptance of psychedelics, as well as America's usually? The weird thing is America's usually far behind on a lot of things.
Yeah, and then sometimes we're really far ahead. It's kind of crazy.
It's weird.
And then there are pockets like Oregon, and now it's I think they have the signatures now in DC. Yeah. So I think the psychedelics is one of the most fascinating areas in this whole thing, just because a lot of people think it's a panacea, that it's one experience and then you're done, which of course isn't the case.
Yeah.
And so, but there's a lot of interest, a lot of people from the cannabis industry who are really interested in it, a lot of the people from the mental health industry who are looking at this. And I think, like, the leaders who have been working on this renaissance, really from a clinical trial perspective, where let's get the regulators, the FDAs or the European equivalents, like, on board, has been really crucial.
Yep.
And now, of course, you're seeing lots of money go into it. These universities, centers for science that are being developed, not just in the US. There's one in London now. In Germany, there's stuff happening. And so it's coming. I think it still will be some time, but people are getting ready for it. For example, whether it be in places where ketamine or ketamine is legal, setting up the infrastructure around clinical or clinic delivery, kind of like the example you gave.
That's already happening, right? I mean, that's already
in some places, yes. But with the eye to ketamine is in the US and in parts of Europe, it's legal. It's not a psychedelic, but it's a trajectorily towards that type of instance. I think we have to just be honest. There's a big debate around, do you need to have that psychedelic experience for it to be true, or is it something that you can create in a pill and take the pill and then you get the effects and you don't have to go through it? Right? What's the IP? Who owns that? These substances that are of the earth originally and have been used for a generation, and so those are important discussions. And I don't think there's an answer. And my position is, I'm not sure if we want to fall on that binary line of right or wrong. For us, is can these activities safely increase people's mental wellness? Yes, then let's talk about it some more. It doesn't have to just be this. Well, I'm on one side or the other, because we have to get over that. We have to get over that, because the potential for these substances to affect a whole hell of a lot of people is so huge.
Yeah. My personal belief is, like, I really don't think they companies should be able to own IP in the core sort of molecules that go in it, because they did not create them, right? Like, it's like you can't have an IP on, like, caffeine, right? Like coffee, right? Like, I think it's treated like that, where you build companies around it, and how you deliver, how you brand and promote your product is the differentiator, right? But the core product, like coffee, right? Like, there's thousands of coffee brands, but at the end of the day, it's coffee, right? So I think I'm hoping that's the route that it takes, where nothing is sort of trademarked, or IP'd, at least around like the core sort of molecules
Sure,
and the
sure.
natural of it. But would you say you would agree with that part?
Don't know. Because I think hopefully there's an infrastructure, an enabling environment, and institutions in place to rule that you can't do that.
Yeah.
And then we go from there, right? But I'm not going to bet on one or the other, especially if people can get access to it. And also access is a big question, because when you come with IP, then you come with costs. Because you got to it costs a shit ton of money to do these clinical trials.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so you have to recoup those costs. Somebody has to pay for it. And
yeah.
But how do you get it so that you open that up? Do you open source? I'm not sure what eventually will happen, but so that the most people can get access to it. That's what I care about.
Yeah. I think access is huge for sure. Yeah. We talk about a bunch of different things, and I think it's kind of important to look at maybe somewhere to start, right?
Sure.
And would you say, because I think we're talking about access, and I go back to food, because most people have access to food. I mean, obviously, there's places around the world that
food deserts,
that unfortunately doesn't exist, and I think obviously the creation of a sort of Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat, and the idea of sort of creating food, I think has a possibility to sort of like help that too. Maybe get people that never had food, like how can we grow food where it doesn't grow is really interesting, and get to people that are dying of starvation. That seems to be really weird that still happens, because we could just like create food in the lab, right? So like I don't know.
It's not an access issue; it's a political issue.
Yeah,
just like poverty is a political issue.
But I guess the access, I meant food. Like, would you say food is a good place where individuals can start, or where investment can first happen, because that landscape is so broad? There's not these clinical trials you have to go to. Right. There's not like software technology and apps you have to set up and create as a delivery system. Is food maybe the first step that personally individuals can take, but also capital can be injected to, whether it's educate, whether it's get access to food, to really start to have food be the catalyst for mental wellness is like the first step.
So I think it's we need a scattershot approach. I think food is one of the biggest things because it affects every single person. I think investing in food is super important, whether it's first or not. I don't think we should decide. It's really looking at where the most opportunity is. Is it mindfulness? Is it looking at culturally appropriate approaches? Is it education? Half of all of mental illnesses happen before you're 14 years old. So there's a huge opportunity for looking at for helping parents out, because it is hard, especially now. Like I just keep worrying. This mental health issue is not going away in our generation. Speaking of generations, Gen Z is the loneliest generation. That might be helped in part because of the rise of social media and digital technologies. But they're also hopefully the first generation that can incorporate mental health into their well-being as a generation, unlike us. Or your generation. I'm 26 days shy of being a millennial, but don't tell anybody. So I think we need to not just focus on nutrition or exercise or workplace wellness. It has to be something that just like we think about with our physical health or emotional health, or the health of our relationships with our family and our loved ones. It is crucial. One
of the big sort of dilemmas I have, like personally, is with sort of these traditional. These sort of, I'm depressed, I'm going to go to my doctor's office and get pills, right? That'll make me feel better. Sure. And now it's stacking anxiety pills on top of other anxiety pills. And it's like, that's, to me, it's like such a, it's such a long game that you're never going to win, right? You're almost addicted now to that, medicine stack that you can never get off of, right? Like, especially if you're not educated on how to do it, you're never going to get off that. It's always going to be then you're taking 20 pills a day. And it's like, is there a way where I go back to like education, right? It's like, how do we know when a person is genuinely like depressed and medication is needed, rather than a person being depressed where maybe just eating different will totally change things, right? Or just exercising. How do we parse that to where it's like we don't have half of America on antidepressants, right?
Yeah. So I think it's what the education around doctors, psychiatrists is also crucial.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at how MDs are trained, they spend very little time learning about nutrition, macro and micronutrients, and the effects on mental wellness. Virtually none. We're fortunate to have someone on our board who's a nutritional psychiatrist, one of the few. And if you ask her, Dr. Georgia Eid, she says, start with the food. Let's
start with the food. Yeah.
Start with the food, and we'll use that as medicine first. And then if the person has psychosomatic or other issues, then there's a chance that we might be able to do things. But just for example, what a specific low carb diet can do in the areas of diabetes or epilepsy or even Alzheimer's, there's clinical research coming out, is phenomenal. And so, I'm not saying one diet is better than the other.
Sure.
I'm saying that a no processed food, whole food, no sugar diet is the best.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that I'm perfect all the time either.
Sure.
COVID has been very difficult. But at least I'm aware and I'm okay with it. I don't beat myself up anymore about it. And so I think that nutrition can be medicine. And so we're looking at using capital that we have and nurturing that capital to push that forward in education aspects. And there's a whole different ecosystems just around the nutrition side, because really it is medicine.
Yeah, it's fascinating to go down that road, and it's weird because like the one thing that it's not weird, it's just how it is, that it's kind of looking back on like going to school and like the subjects we were never taught about, like the two really most important things, like money and like nutrition.
Yes.
It's just like not taught. Nope. And it's like I don't understand why we can't. It's almost like we're afraid to teach people about money and like how really like finance really works. Like we feel, I don't know if it's like we just don't have the people to teach it in the schools, or but then foods, like you learn like fruits and vegetables, right? And like that's it. That's it. Like that's it. That's your education in it, and that's it.
I mean, look at the standard American diet. There's a reason why the acronym spells out SAD. It's fucking ridiculous. And you also peel back some of those layers. Why is that? Who's paying for that? What industry groups are paying for it? What lobbyists are up on Capitol Hill trying to ensure that we, eat lots of fortified, enriched materials? Like, why do you need to take wheat and then bleach it and then add back the nutrients? That's a whole nother right?
Man. And the long-term effects of this stuff, right? Like you can make a case for it being as equally as terrible as like cigarettes, right? But it's not looked at that. It's not looked like that.
No. And then you look at people popping pills all the time because that's what society says. You have a problem, go get a pill for it. Well, who is behind that? Yeah. Right? Where's that money? Follow the money. And it'll always go back to some other interests that aren't have at least humans' best interest in mind. They're worried about their own wallets. And we see that with the opioid scandal that just broke in the last year or so. And I could go on forever, but really, follow the money. Why is this the big issues? And so that's why we really realize that it's time for looking at a new way of doing of capitalism. And more investors really want to see an impact in their money. It's not just that they get a 3, 5, 10x return, but they also at the same time can take solace in knowing that their money has affected X number of lives. And so we have ways and things in place to be able to know that and measure that in coordination with our founders. Because if founders have that information about the number of lives that they're affecting, and also the story about how they changed their service to be able to affect more lives while not compromising on profitability, then they're going to get more investors. They're going to be able to have more partnerships, and their ability to scale will be so much easier. It's just common sense.
Yeah, it really is.
But what happens, I think, just because the VC model that's coming out of Silicon Valley was just about push hard, like fucking just ram them into the ground until they grow, so we can get that valuations and liquidate.
Let's not make any money. Let's not be profitable.
Well, that's another whole thing. Yeah, this growth over revenue, that's a huge, so that's one of the reasons actually we're investing 50% of our capital in Europe, because we feel in Europe the social system, the welfare, the socialist, oh my gosh, people are more attuned to nurturing that capital and focusing more on revenue and making sure that there is a product market fit instead of just doing pure ad buys and getting people to download their apps, whatever that might be, right? And And people, I think, here are also more willing to have those honest discussions about organizational health, and that's coming, yes, in the US, but I think it's more ripe here in Europe. And those are the things that we're saying. You want to work with us? Sure, absolutely. But we're going to come and you're going to have to do a little bit more work on building out impact models. Like, have you ever built an impact model out before? Or what's your organizational? I know you're 3 people now, but in 5 years, what kind of HR policies do you have around diversity and inclusion? People's heads spin, but they understand the importance of looking at it now.
It's an incredible and fascinating conversation that this sort of mental wellness sector is sort of like exploding in a really good way, because I think I think just education really matters, and I think people are like seeking out that, and they're finding it on their own, right? You're not getting taught at school, but if you're a 15, 16-year-old kid and you want to research food, right? Or you can do that now, right? You can find a wealth of information, watch videos and really do, some incredible knowledge seeking on your own, which has never happened in like human history before, right? So that's, to me, a positive is having that education as like a delivery system early on. And if the schools don't want to do it, then hopefully there's a market opportunity there where companies can do it. But we talked a lot about the past and what's going on now. I like to end on sort of future a little bit. And I know it's a little uncertain times, obviously, right now. But what do you hope to see the next 3 to 5 years in your space? From the fund. I guess what's your thought process around that? What do you like to think about long term?
Sure. I think a number of things. First, that mental illness really comes out of the dark. It's no longer this crazy silent pandemic that exists.
Right.
That there's amazing uptake, that providers, insurance providers, and health systems really prioritize it, and it's in budgets, and it's all around. And that by default, organizational health is something you talk about, not just about the return on investment, but what's the return on organizational health. And as we see the increase in ESG and impact funding in the investment world happening, that we finally hit the tipping point where impact is expected and not just that returns. And I think those are all points that we've built to help push forward in our small way. Because even though we'll be a 50 million euro fund, it seems like a lot of money. It's nothing. That is next to nothing. It's not even like a half of a grain of sand in the whole grand scheme of things. It's crazy to think, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
But by kind of being on like these early, like pushing the envelope about and holding ourselves accountable. For example, the potential finance that we as a group can get is actually directly tied to meeting those impact targets. If we don't meet them, which is verified by an independent entity, then we don't get all of our carried interest. And nor does our LPs, because our limited partners, those who invest in us, need to hold us accountable, not just for the profitability of these companies, but also for the impact maximization of these companies. And their money is directly tied to it too. So that's kind of a part of the paradigm shift that we're working to put in place. Because it can't just be about the finances anymore. Even though we all say, yes, we want to be focus on mental health, and we know increased mental health is good for society. Okay, well, show me the fucking money. Like, where is it? And show me the number of people who have been improved. Show me the research. Like, we're funding our randomized control trials, evidence-based access. If we need to, we'll partner with others to fund clinical trials. Like, it's important that we have that data, and that data is rich, so that we're not making the mistakes of just whoever has the best ad buy or has the best marketing campaign win. That's not. Doesn't cut it anymore, especially in this area.
Yeah. I appreciate you taking the time, man. It's a long journey. It's going to be a long fight. It's sort of, two sides are really, it's kind of that, man. I know there's going to, like you said before, there's going to be some lobbyists that are going to be, taking the other side of things. Right. And it's going to, it's just, it's it's going to be a battle for everything, but we need capital to fight it, right? Like that's the main point. And then that capital allocated correctly can show improvement, show the data of what's happening. I mean, that's the road to success and really healing, right? And kind of just taking that next evolution where depression is no longer an issue, or it's a disease that can be quote unquote solved, right? In some way. So keep up the amazing work, man. And I wish the best of luck for this year, and obviously next year. Hopefully it's a little bit more normalized, and stuff could rapidly start to set in motion. So thanks for everything, man. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Grant. And thanks for the work that you do. Continue the newsletter. It's great.